Now we're working very strongly with China on the coronavirus. That's a new thing that a lot of people are talking about, and we think we have it very well under control. We have very little problem in this country at this moment.
That was just over 2 years ago. Today, America is on the verge of 900,000 lives lost to the pandemic. It didn't have to be this way. But it's not just the fault of President Trump, though he takes a lot of responsibility for it, or should. My next guest looks at more than a dozen leaders and public figures who not only failed to meet the moment, but in some cases undermined efforts to fight the pandemic alongside the Donald. He also examines those who profited off the crisis and asks whether anyone will face consequences. John Nichols' new book is titled Coronavirus, Criminals and Pandemic Profiteers, Accountability for Those Who Caused the Crisis. And John Nichols joins me now. He's the national affairs correspondent for The Nation. John, welcome to the show. Congratulations on the book. You divide the book into 18 chapters, each focused on one villain of this crisis. You, of course, have a chapter on President Trump. But let's start with the first son-in-law, or former first son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Tell us how much death you think he helped cause.
Oh, the numbers are huge. You know, it's always something you have to be a little careful about with throwing numbers out. But one thing that I'll emphasize is that the Lancet study, where they analyzed the disproportional amount of death in the United States, suggested that in that first year, about 40% of the people who died may have died unnecessarily. So we're talking in the hundreds of thousands here. And it's then important to take a look at who had responsibility. Well, Jared Kushner was put in charge of the supply chain for healthcare materials, for protective gear, et cetera, at a critical stage, and he completely blew it. Like everything else he touches, it just fell apart. And the end result is that I think you can point a finger of blame at Jared Kushner, not just because he was incompetent. That would be one thing, but also because he chose to enrich multinational corporations to move money to them rather than to come up with a plan that could have easily been done to get the gear, to get the supplies from U.S. companies made by folks here or imported, but with an assurance that it got to the people who needed it. He didn't do that.
And it's not just Republicans like Kushner. You also have a chapter on former New York Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo. It feels like many have forgotten, amid the wave of his many other scandals, how deadly his policy was for nursing homes during the pandemic, right?
That's exactly right. And again, people make mistakes. In my book, I didn't just say, oh, somebody screwed up and we've got to punish him for that. What I was interested in was people who deliberately did something that they either should have known or did know was wrong, and then in many cases tried to cover it up. With Cuomo, the decisions he made were bad in the first place, and then he tried to cover them up. He actually threatened people, state legislators, who said, look, we've got to jump on this and get this right. And then the other thing that's important to do, I hate to say, is follow the money. Because the fact of the matter is, like Mitch McConnell, Andrew Cuomo tried to do, and in fact did, liability shields for corporations that made it harder for people to hold to account the corporations that did this harm.
Shamefully. People might be surprised to see that you also have a chapter on Pfizer and its vaccine effort. You write, while early reporting on the rollout of vaccines tended to portray pharmaceutical corporations and their CEOs as heroic figures, that was always a fantasy. By and large, they were in it for the money, and one company, Pfizer, was in it for very big money. Pfizer would say, John, that they should be able to profit from their development. Are you saying that they should not have made any money from the vaccine, or simply that they made too much?
During World War II, President Roosevelt and the Democrats in Congress said, yeah, U.S. companies can make money. You know, they can make a little bit of money, but they said they can't make excess profits. And I think that's a good standard in any crisis situation. You don't want corporations that are doing something that's necessary and useful to make exponential profits. And it's important to remember that there was one study a little bit back that suggested that Pfizer and Moderna were making $1,000 a second, $65,000 a minute, $93 million a day. I would assert to you that for companies that will not share their vaccines with the rest of the world, and in so many ways have been self-serving players, that is an excess profit.
Come on, John, 93 million a day is not enough for the Pfizer board to live on. Come on, be fair. Has there been any accountability for any of the people involved in exacerbating, in prolonging this pandemic? And if not, why hasn't there been?
Well, I think there's been one form of accountability. Donald Trump was defeated for re-election. And I think that his absolute mishandling of the pandemic was a huge part of that. And so I don't rule out that reality. I think that electoral accountability is one thing. But there's been so little realistic accountability in the form that most people think about it. And if I can just give you one example, billionaires in the United States were worth about $3 trillion. They had about $3 trillion in wealth, but when the pandemic began, they now have about $5 trillion. We often think of accountability as civil, criminal, congressional action, but taxation is also a form of accountability. And the fact is that billionaires should not have been able to take that much wealth in that short amount of time. And I would like to see an accountability moment that said that we can claw a lot of that back. Remember, under President Eisenhower, we had a top marginal tax rate of 91, 92%. During World War II, it got up to 94, 95%. And I would say in a crisis situation, when we can look at billionaires and say they've got so much money they can fly off into space, there could be a lot of tax accountability there.
We were talking yesterday with West Point professor Elizabeth Samet about America's collective amnesia when it comes to our foreign wars, World War II. At least that was over 7 decades ago. We seem to have moved on from a pandemic that only kicked off 2 years ago.
That's exactly right. And, this is one of the big problems. I write about this in the book. In the United States, we tend to have a reaction to disasters that they're all natural disasters. They're like a hurricane or something like that. The fact of the matter is that there are many crises that can be made better or worse by how we respond to them. And one of the worst responses is to just imagine that something is done, to say, wow, this has just overwhelmed us. It's been so awful. We're going to stop talking about it. We're going to stop thinking about it. That's not the right way to approach it. The right way to approach it is to say, look, there are people along the way who have made this much worse. We need to hold them to account, and that accountability drives change.
And that's Iraq, that's financial crisis, that's COVID. John Nichols, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. The new book is Coronavirus Criminals and Pandemic Profiteers, Accountability for Those Who Caused the Crisis.